Hello again, everybody. Thanks for coming back for part 4 of my testimony this week. Had some people ask me to do that, so I decided that I would. I told you last time how I came up empty in the music and entertainment world. I was successful from a business and a career standpoint, but I was just empty and unsuccessful spiritually. So then, through a series of events, I got a Bible, started studying it, started listening to God and hearing from God, and my life really started changing. I eventually, took me a couple of years to do this because I had long-term contracts with my band, but I quit playing full-time. I actually went on staff at the time, what I called a good Bible teaching church here in Lawrence, Kansas, and it was a good church, a lot of good people. And I was being discipled then by the pastor and by someone who was a long-term missionary in a parachurch organization, a wonderful man. And they were both very, very, very much into Bible study and into scripture memory. And that's basically all we did, study the Bible and scripture memory. And real quickly, I went on staff at that church. It was a growing church, and I went on staff as the music minister and evangelism pastor, because I had a heart for people who'd been where I was, and I wanted to help them know Jesus, like I did. So I'm doing this, and I want to tell my friends about Jesus, but the church that we went to at the time had a choir that wore robes, organ. The pastor was a really good man, but he had lost his joy. That's another subject for another day. And he basically, almost all of his sermons were about missionaries and suffering for Jesus. I asked him one time if he wouldn't teach on joy, and he said, well, that's a good subject. And a few weeks later, he taught on the joy of suffering. So at any rate, I wanted to reach people, and I knew that they wouldn't come to that type of a setting because they weren't used to organ music. They weren't used to seeing anybody in a robe unless it was a judge. So at any rate, I found out about the Willow Creek Community Church in Chicago and the Willow Creek organization. I made several trips there. I found out that they were doing church a different way. They were doing contemporary church with a band, with a vocal team. They were doing drama. They were relevant. They didn't have stained glass windows and pews and things like that. It's very upbeat. And I took to that like a duck to water because that was what my background was entertainment. And so I left the church that I was at with a small group of people, started a church, had never gone to Bible school or seminary, took a lot of classes, continued to work with my friend who was in a parachurch organization, continued to study the Bible, and we started building this little church from about 12 people, eventually to somewhere around 250 people. And we were all about changing behavior because, I said, what do I do now when I started this? They said, well, you got to change your behavior. The church I went on staff in had rules to be a member there. You had to sign a thing saying you wouldn't drink alcohol, you wouldn't smoke cigarettes, you wouldn't gamble, nor would you work at any place that sold alcohol, tobacco, or lottery tickets or things like that. Of course, cussing and all that that was just a given. But they were really primarily into memorizing scripture. They were big on hell. They were big on giving. They were big on attending church, going to church, and serving. They were big on evangelism and serving and that type of thing. So we eventually start our church, and we do a contemporary church. And we have a good band, singers and all of that. We do drama. We did that pretty well, too. A lot of good things happen in that church, a lot of really good people. We started a free medical clinic for homeless people, which is still going today. I'm not associated with it anymore, but they serve thousands of people. Really, some really good things happen at that church. And we had a lot of good friends at that. I still, though, found myself working real hard to achieve something like I had in music and business and coming up empty. I mean, we had all the trappings of a good church and good ministry and stuff like that, but something was still missing for me. And in particular, I was not having any I wasn't having any success at controlling anger. I would get very angry sometimes, just clear out of the blue, and hurt people, primarily my wife and my family, their close friends or whatever. I didn't want to do that. I didn't like doing that. I went to counseling, and I couldn't change. And I was told by the people who were mentoring me, if you memorize Bible verses like, the righteousness of man is not achieved by anger and things like that, if you just remember those things and in your sin do not anger, well, then you'll be able to not sin. Well, I memorized those verses, and it did not help. So I came up empty again spiritually. I was really disillusioned because I thought, I'm doing all the right things. I've jumped through every hoop. I've memorized entire chapters of the Bible, a lot of them. I give more than the tithe. I serve. I gave up my music career. Look at me doing something good for God, so he owes me. Well, I felt like God owed me and that I should have been able to change because I did everything that they asked me to do. But I still kept coming up empty. And then finally, one day after about 18 years, when I had yet again lost my temper, I went into a room, got down on my knees, and I said, Jesus, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. If I'm going to change, you're going to have to do it. And he said, that's what I've been waiting for. You'll get the last installment next week. Thanks for listening. See you then.